Ready, go.
Everybody ready? When you think of the people that passed through that door, you think of the 1900 storm, people who survived in there. It's been quite a project.
The whole point of this is to be able to restore the lighthouse back to her glory of 150 years ago and share her with the world.
One of the main navigational beacons for one of the most significant ports in the United States. Can you imagine coming into the port as an immigrant in the 1870s, 80s, 90s and looking and being able to see the lighthouse like, wow, that's where you're going to call home?
About 1/8 of an inch, and just that amount of shift is enough to... Ready, guys? The Bolivar Lighthouse project, which is underway right now, a major restoration, reached out to me to reproduce the original riveted iron door to the lighthouse. It's been quite a project. Then they got the radios on. Blast it like this so you can hear it over the... And then you got them talking over the radio, over the motor.
So it was 1872. There was not anything here at that time. I can't imagine how desolate the Bolivar Peninsula was back then.
No jetties, no channel markers. There
No
was
railroad?
Nothing. No railroad, nothing.
Nothing.
Could you tell us a story about the construction of the current lighthouse?
A company out of New York won the contract, and they had to demonstrate the fit of all the iron pieces in New York before they were crated up and shipped. So it was assembled in New York and then disassembled, crated up, put on a ship. They sailed to Galveston, and they had to build a pier to unload the parts.
The original door, we were able to extract the hinges and the back straps, which were still in good enough shape, and we're reusing the original frame. And between the two of those, the whole mechanism really is the original mechanism. But the plate that makes up the door itself was so far gone, you can see some of the rust expansion or rust jacking here. And that iron just keeps delaminating and delaminating until there's no iron left. And it also, that expansion has the capacity to lift tens of tons too. And that's why a lot of buildings get damaged from iron that's trapped and expanding like that.
So there was no way you could keep this door on there and just restore it?
No. It was the metal loss was too much.
The iron all came from New York, and they had to put it together the old way, you know, with the crane that went up as the tower went up, and the stairs are iron, and they each locked together in a sequence of pieces. Quite the jigsaw puzzle. Mm-hmm. It's a brick cylinder that has flying buttresses that protrude out from the central core, and then the iron is attached on the outside to the buttresses. So they're mutually supporting. All the weight of the iron's pushing in, buttresses sticking out, and it's very strong.
So I went and I burned out one of the original rivets, where there was no material loss. And when I was able to see it, it's like, that is 1/4 inch plate. So a 1/4 inch plate is twice as heavy. The gate now weighs what I thought. 2 men pulled it off. We lifted it and got it off the lighthouse. 2 of us got it. 4 people can't lift this one. Just because of, it's so much more massively heavy. It's almost 400 pounds.
Well, the lighthouse is actually older than the Alyssa. I think Alyssa is 1877. Lighthouse has got the Alyssa by a few years, so. Both times that Alyssa called on Galveston, the lighthouse was here.
Okay. On the ship, there'd be the guy heating the rivets. He'd throw the rivet to a guy holding a leather bucket, and he'd have a leather glove on. And he'd reach in and grab it and throw it in the hole, then the guy would back it up, they'd hammer on the hull, and the guy'd start hammering from the outside. The reason that I've gotten experience doing riveting like this is when I worked on the restoration of Alyssa during the first restoration in the late 70s and 80s. We had to replace a lot of hull and a lot of rivets. And they tried doing a lot of welding, but they found out that welding old wrought iron is really touchy. We decided, okay, we're going to rivet everything. So I was one of the rivet gang, and we did that for off and on for 1.5 years, riveting. The hull sections were a lot bigger, much bigger rivets, much bigger pieces of iron, but those rivets are watertight.
Why rivets? Why not just long bolts?
The thing that rivets have that nothing else has is this: when you're riveting the hot rivet, you're putting the rivet in, and it seems as though the hole that you've drilled is a little bit too big when you drill it, and you put a cold rivet in, and it just seems sloppy. But that's to compensate for the expansion of the rivet when it goes in the hole. And so you drill it a little bit larger. The hot rivet goes in, you back it, which is the critical part. You got to have a really solid backing. So it comes up through the hole, and the exposed, not molten, but close to it, is exposed. And then you hammer that down and create the mushroom head and force all that metal down in to that extra cavity and then form it over. And then the real sweet thing about it is when the metal contracts, it draws it together tighter than any nut and bolt could do. And there's no backing out, there's no the thread loosening. Plus there's just a perfectly tight gap. You don't see, it's amazing, you see the rusted elements. Around the rivet will be perfectly thick metal underneath it, but around it is totally eroded from the weather, but the rust wouldn't get through there. So it's a fascinating process.
Could you tell us a little bit about the 1900 storm and how the lighthouse played a part?
There were 125 people that rode the storm out in the lighthouse. And you can't imagine how scary, how loud. As the water rose, people had to keep rising up 2 by 2 up in the stairwell.
The wind would have been deafening, and then the water coming up, and then eventually to the top of the door.
And the historical significance of the lighthouse.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And you think of the people that passed through that door, you think of the 1900 storm and the people who survived in there.
Most importantly, you're keeping the entire restoration of the lighthouse historically accurate and how they would have done it when it was built.
Right.
Thank y'all so much for preserving history. It's imperative through actually physically saving something that's 150 years old that has been such a part of this part of Texas and the United States.